Now, one thing to be very aware of is if you set up a tank with very fine sand, besides the fact that it looks really cool, it always comes with a little bit of risk. Because what can happen with this really fine sand is the oxygen can't actually penetrate the sand. Then what happens is the nitrifying bacteria forms in the top, then the oxygen can't get its way down into this super fine sand, and then at the bottom you start to form anaerobic bacteria, and some of these anoxic bacteria can produce what's called hydrogen sulfide. That doesn't mean it will happen, but it might happen. Now, the hydrogen sulfide is actually very poisonous. It's poisonous to you and it's poisonous to the fish. Now, if you don't disturb that substrate, the chances are nothing's really going to happen. It is possible it will leach out over time, drop your pH and just cause you some trouble. But there has been circumstances where I've been involved in somebody's aquarium and the fish are fine, everything's okay. Then I've come along as the aquarium expert and I have disturbed the rocks and swapped it all around, trying to make it look better. 1 step forward, 3 steps back. Then what I've done is disturb the deeper layer where the hydrogen sulfide potentially is. That gets released into the water and can potentially either wipe all the fish out as I'm standing there watching, which has happened to me before. And no matter what your credibility is, what an expert you are, you look like a dick when you go to someone's house to help them with their fish and you kill them all. So the things that you can do is, number one, you could consider reducing the amount of substrate. That would be an option. You could stir the substrate regularly. That would be an option. Or the inclusion of media like polyfilter does actually have the capacity of removing the hydrogen sulfide. So the hydrogen sulfide is definitely not a death wish. It can be totally fine, but then on the other hand, you just need to be aware of the risks. Reference to what I was just talking about with hydrogen sulfide in the sand. Now, the hydrogen sulfide in the sand is really not an issue if we have a very good cover of plants. So if we have plenty of roots through this plant, the roots themselves should stop any hydrogen sulfide issues. So what is going to happen with this tank is it's been decided that shrimp and fighting fish can go in there. Now, shrimp and fighting fish is something that certainly can work, but not something that you're going to guarantee is going to work. And what I mean by that is that the shrimp will want to breed, so it's really important we add stuff like Java moss. Plenty of Java moss will give the baby shrimp somewhere to survive. And then the bigger shrimp are normally okay with fighters unless they're big, massive ones, but there's always a risk. If you get a psycho fighter, he might knock your shrimp. Normally they don't, but once again, will your dog get along with my dog? It's unfortunately up to the dog, not us or what you've read. And then whenever you introduce any new fish with a fighting fish, it's actually a pretty good idea to grab the fighting fish out, whack him in a little salad bowl in water from the tank, leave him there for a day or two, even just give the tank a bit of a rearrange, swap some rocks or plants around if possible, and then put the fighting fish back in again. It tends to make them adjust more, and in that time you can introduce the new fish and give them a bit of time to settle down, because what you really don't want to do is introduce fish to a fighting fish that's really well established, because if the fighting fish is really well established, you might find him a little bit territorial, and if that's his house and suddenly there's new people in it, then that's when he's more likely to get aggressive. So a little bit of a swap the plants around and have him out for a while, and you put the new ones in, and when the new ones go in, you give them a day or so, let them calm down, because what you don't want is them being all stressed, because when they're stressed, they're going to attract his attention, and he's more likely to attack the other fish when they're stressed. If the other fish are settled in, he's much less likely to attack them. Some plants we've got for this tank. We've got some anubias. Anubias is a wonderful plant. It's a low light plant. It'd be quite good for this tank. Very easy to keep. And then we've got some crypts. And crypts are more of a bottom plant, whereas the Java can grow on the rocks as well. Now, when you buy these plants, they come with these little pots underneath, and it would make sense to you that that's a perfect place to grow the plants, but it really isn't. The pots are really just there to protect the roots when you're transporting them. So the plants actually do better if you take them out of the pots and then actually plant them properly, which is a shame. I wish they actually sold the pots, the plants ready to pot, but then I have heard that that makes them not transport well. So this is just designed to protect the roots when they transport. So I guess that makes sense. So just having a little chat about this tank. So we've whacked a few plants in here. We've got some crypts on the bottom and some anubias, and we're introducing a fighting fish. Later on there is a plan for some shrimp to go in there. So if we put large shrimp in and the fighting fish is relatively small, the fighting fish don't fit the shrimp in their mouth, then maybe it will be okay. If your shrimp get real small and your fighting fish is really big, there's always a risk of it getting eaten. Now, as far as the plants go, this tank's got light on it. So if you had about 8 hours a day light on the tank and you had some fish in the tank, then it is possible that these plants will absolutely thrive, adding absolutely nothing. On the other hand, over a period of time, if you find your plants are getting a little bit yellow, then it would be good to add a fertilizer such as this. So this is a fertilizer, shrimp safe fertilizer product. Now, it would be a fairly good idea just to add a small amount anyway. But once again, there are nutrients introduced by your fish, and depending on the amount of plants, if you have a lot of plants and the plants are growing really fast, you'll find that this sort of thing is actually quite important. If you don't have that many plants, and if your plants aren't growing particularly fast, then this is actually not all that important. So, once again, you look at the color of the plants, and if they start going yellow, you need more of that. So we also don't want to be adding too much of that. So it can be a little bit of a trial and error thing. So by all means, you could start with just a very, very low dose of it, but we don't want to go getting too excited about it, because if we go putting too much in, we can end up with too much algae. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about is the algae. So if over time your plants look good and they're green and everyone's happy, then you don't need to worry. If it's not broken, you really don't have to fix it. On the other hand, over a period of time, if you start seeing blackbeard algae growing on the plant, then there are products such as various carbon-based products, such as Carbon Plus, and this helps to advantage the plant over the blackbeard algae and does help to control your blackbeard algae. So by adding a dose of this on a regular basis, you can either stop the blackbeard algae from coming altogether, or you can actually treat it by upping the dose. Now, this is one of those things, though, that there's no logic behind. The reason why I'm saying that is that some of my customers don't use any of this stuff, and their plants seem to grow absolutely fine. But it is relative to the amount of plants, too. As you get more plants and your plants go better, this stuff becomes more important. So, moving on, this is a vitamin product, which by all means we can add. Once again, all these products are not that important at the start, and they're not that important when we don't have many plants. As this becomes more grown out, then the introduction of this stuff becomes more important. I'm not a big fan of starting up and just loading all this stuff in there. I would rather start more minimally and just use very little to none of this stuff at the start. And then as we get more plants and as it establishes and all the rest of it, then I will actually put more focus on this. Now, when we start this tank up, we want to make sure that we're using water ager in any new water, and we definitely want to add water ager if we get ammonia or nitrite or nitrate in the aquarium, as it'll detoxify it, and we definitely want to use it for any top-up water. Good bacteria products are a good thing to add just to make sure that our good bacteria is well established. These products are really better in the fridge once you open it. Now, adding a GH product is a good idea to make sure that our general hardness is correct, and I will add that according to the test. So what I'll do is I'll go and do a test now, and then I'm likely to find that's low, so therefore I'll give that a dose, and then later on in the future I want to test it again and dose it as required. So as long as my GH is somewhere like 8, I'll probably be quite happy. Now, the KH is the same. I will test the KH, and the shrimp actually like quite a low KH. So basically, I do not want 0, but I don't want it to be high. So I'll check the KH, and as long as it's 1 or above 1, I'll be quite happy. But what I don't want to do is start loading this product up and putting the KH too high. I want the KH really so it's just measurable. And every tank is different, because how often you do water changes is going to affect your GH, and anything that you have in the aquarium or add to the aquarium can affect your GH. For example, even the water age can affect your GH. Then the KH is your buffering capacity, and that over time tends to fall. So once again, every tank is different. So if you check your KH and you find it 0, then you need to add this, because over a long period of time, a level of 0 can affect your nitrifying bacteria. It causes you all sorts of trouble. But at the same time, I don't want to go jacking it up too much. So a lot of this stuff is a little bit of trial and error, and it is governed by your testing. So it is quite simple. We check your GH and we add it as needed. We check your KH and we add it as needed. If these levels are too high, what we want to do is do a water change, and we're not going to add them. If the level is low, then we're going to add them. So it is not one size fits all. I am not a fan of we add a dose rate and we forget about it, because that really just isn't the case. If we have lots of fish and shrimp, then that level will tend to fall. If we don't, it'll tend to stay. If we're from one tank to another tank, we can get variations in the GH, variations in the KH. I'm much more reactive according to what I'm seeing and according to what I'm testing than just picking a level and just adding it. This tank has no ammonia and nitrite in it at the moment, so we're right to release our fish. And as a new setup, it's good to wait a day or two just to see if you've got a bad batch of tap water, or see if you haven't cleaned your sand properly, which might result in you getting some ammonia and nitrite. But once you've got no ammonia or nitrite, if you don't have fish in the tank, then you have no food source. So therefore your tank isn't really cycling, and nothing is really happening until you add a food source. So testing your water and getting your water right is then the right time to add fish, and waiting for another week or 2 weeks is an absolute waste of time, because nothing biologically happens without the food source. Now, something you do hear people talking of is the fighting fish sitting on top of the leaf, and many companies actually sell fake leaves that stick on the side of the tank so your fighting fish can sit on top of it. And there you go, there's a fighting fish sitting on the leaf, just like you hear about.